Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. I'm Ian Stone.
I'm Neil Munro.
So today we're talking about asbestos and COVID and the things that need to be considered when carrying out an asbestos removal project. Recently, we were on a project with some contractors and the HC visited us and we had a discussion with them on site. And part of the discussion was what was in place around COVID and coronavirus and decontamination and things like that. So when they visited, they weren't really, I mean, they were there to do a license visit for the contractor. And this was just one of the things that came up in discussion and around it. But that they were kind of, and we find this more and more, when HC do visits, it's not necessarily the asbestos elements that they're really looking for, because contractors are licensed, they've got everything in place to paperwork, trails, all the rest of it. All those things have been checked by the HC when applying for their license. And I think what the HC do more and more is to look for other things outside of asbestos for risk management purposes. And that was one of the conversations that happened. And like I say, it was around COVID and it was the use of a toilets, wasn't it? It was domestic property. The contractors had listed down that they were using that as their welfare, but it was the question over, well, how can the contractors use it as their welfare and the actual domestic homeowner use it as their welfare? And the long short of it was that the toilet was to be cleaned before and after every use by everyone going in there. And it was for the contractor's sole purpose. So the domestic homeowner vacated the property for the day. So that then basically left the asbestos contractors with the kind of full autonomy over the use of it and then could control that coronavirus risk.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they were to do a full decontamination and clean down procedure with it.
Yeah. I think what this comes down to is every business place needs to be COVID secure to obviously operate and have the staff come to work and be safe and protected from COVID transition while they're working. And I think where you then step into a domestic situation, there are obviously those procedures, additional items or whatever it is you need to make that secure are probably not going to be in place. So the minute that you then create a workplace within a domestic setting, you need to apply the COVID secure procedures and anything else that goes with that, whether it be, the facilities to wash your hands or sanitize your hands, sanitize surfaces, touch points, etc. And obviously the social distancing element as well, whether you can physically social distance within that element. Now, while the asbestos removal work is probably happening within an enclosure, social distancing is probably not going to be an issue, but it's kind of the setup, going to look at the job, the setup, the decamping of the enclosure and clearing site, and then how it's left is stuff that needs to be looked at and made sure that it is essentially COVID secure.
Yeah, and that's just the thing that we wanted to raise, because what the HC officer told us was that there's been other sites that they've gone to where they haven't even considered it.
Yeah, and I think we when this all kind of kicked off, we did a couple of podcasts about, COVID-19 and coronavirus.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
This, we've done another one today, because this thing ain't going away.
No.
Not in the, the short-term future.
No.
And, people really do need to get on board with, considering it, particularly going to work, and the HC rightly going into people's houses because, in a domestic setting, you're not going to have the procedures, you're not going to have everything in place that you should do. And that kind of goes across the board, even back to asbestos. These domestic places are not going to have the same stuff as, commercial settings.
I mean, even some commercial settings don't have the everything in place.
True. True.
You went to a window showroom recently, didn't you? And it was non-existent.
COVID never happened.
Yeah, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. If you are having asbestos removal works done and the HC are made aware that the job's going on because an ASB 5, a 14-day notification has been given to them. And if they decide to visit that project, yes, they're there to look at the asbestos works and the risks and hazards associated and surrounding it. However, it's not a closed thing. They don't turn up with their blinkers on. They don't merely look at the asbestos stuff. And that's what I mean earlier. Like I say, they kind of don't even look at the asbestos stuff anymore because everything is in place for them. It is the other things like slips, trips and falls. It's working at height. It's the other risks associated.
Yeah, that they're looking at. And the project as a whole.
And that's what I was just saying. It's the project as a whole. So that you might have one small element of a project that is asbestos. It could be a construction site with a load of other stuff. Well, if HC has rocked up and they are happy and satisfied that everything's all good with that project, and they've got time, they're always going to, turn and have a look at the other stuff. And even if you haven't got other works going on, other projects going on, if it is a commercial setting, if it is an office, if it is a warehouse, again, they will kind of, once they're satisfied with the asbestos removal project, they'll go, well, do you know what? Actually, while I'm here, can you run me through your COVID policy as a company?
Yes.
Can I inspect your site? Can I? And they will do, and they've got the right to.
Yeah. You
can't refuse a HC officer for looking at what they want to look at on your.
They've essentially got more powers than the police.
Yeah.
When it comes to that type of scenario.
Yeah, because police need to turn up with a warrant to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
A HC officer does not.
No.
They can go wherever they want.
Yeah, so that is definitely something to be aware of. And the HC they've got a focus on, obviously and rightly so, COVID-19 and companies, businesses, places of work being COVID secure.
Yeah, I mean speaking to a friend recently who owns a hairdressers, and they've had the environmental health in, and they've actually set up a COVID team. I don't know if this is the same across the country or what, but locally in Northamptonshire, this is the case. They have a COVID team that go around and inspect retail premises, and they wear body cams to go into a premise, and they will basically knock on the door, pop in, say, hi, I'm from the COVID team, show them ID, explain that they're there to review what's in place and if everything's in place. And like I say, for a hairdresser, it's pretty obvious straight away if things are being followed or not, because if people aren't wearing masks, they haven't got masks on, they're going to get in trouble quite quickly, and the evidence has already been collected because of the body camera. So like you said earlier, this isn't going away. And in fact, I think this is going to build more and more and more over the coming months, especially now we're heading into winter.
Yeah.
And the kind of all the government science is basically saying it's going to get worse. So therefore, the kind of checks in place for making sure everyone is okay are only going to get stricter. It's not going to lessen off. It's not going to slacken off.
Stricter and possibly penalties even higher.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have a project coming up that's asbestos involved, then I would just double check that everything is in place really, and just double check with the contractor that they have dotted the I's, crossed the T's.
Yeah, or if you're a business that is maybe struggling with their COVID-19 coronavirus policies, making their business COVID secure, then reach out to us as well, because we can definitely assist with that. Assisting you put your risk assessments and your procedures in place. Okay, hope you found that useful. Remember, asbestos first, not last.